この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Welcome to Sushi Bites. Success! Actually, maybe not success. Depends how you...
Welcome to Sushi Bites. Back in the relatively less shitty year of 2014, Sushi Bites moved from a singular joke video into a regular series format. Well, sort of regular. We looked at some pachinko games, which weren't all that exciting, and then we took a brief look at the Cotton series. Sushi Bites Episode 3, Fantastic Night Dreams Cotton. I was young, naive, and inexperienced, but I still think this episode holds up rather well. I was struggling with a great number of personal problems at the time and needed something to latch onto, so I threw myself at Sushi Bites, full steam. While we spent some time with the first game in Episode 3, the remaining Cotton games were left as footnotes. I recently thought it might be fun to go back to some of the games we skipped and cover them in more depth. I know, I thought it would be fun to play Cotton, knowing full well that these games are not easy. Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
There's also a Sega Saturn and arcade sequel. I haven't played that, so I can't judge.
Well, younger me, I can now safely say I have. This is Magical A Night Dreams Cotton 2, released in arcades and for the Sega Saturn in 1997. We're looking at the Sega Saturn version here, which requires an external RAM cartridge to play. This is essentially everything one would want from a sequel to 1991's Fantastic Night Dreams. Cotton and her fairy friend Silk are now joined by new characters Aptly and her hat Needle. Along with new friends, the game also brings new mechanics to the 2D Cotton gameplay. You can grab and throw enemies, which can be used to string combos together for high scores and massive damage. I've heard the Saturn referred to as a 2D powerhouse. Cotton makes good use of the Saturn's sprightly sprite functionality. Backgrounds are very detailed with gorgeous gradient skies. Foreground elements stand out perfectly fine and are easy to avoid. Characters and enemy sprites use rotation, and some basic lighting effects can be applied to the sprites in real time. Though gameplay takes place in 2D, objects orbit around enemies and bosses. Stunning. Stylish. The game manages to maintain a smooth, consistent frame rate with no hiccups, probably thanks to that external RAM cart requirement. The game also features large animated portraits during cutscenes, but unfortunately these sequences are spoiled by the lack of voiceover. They've got a disc to store the game on, but they're barely using a 15th of the available space. The least they could have done was give us some voice acting for this. I don't really understand what's going on with the story, but hey, Cotton 2 is a fun time. The Saturn version doesn't emulate all that well, but that's just the luck of the draw.
There was also a remake of sorts afterwards that was the same game again but slightly different. Haven't played that either.
Well, past me, allow me to fill in the blanks again. Magical Night Dreams Cotton Boomerang was released in 1998, and is to Cotton 2 what Martian Adventure is to the first Cotton. This is a remix version with a whole ton of kick-ass new stuff. Instead of playing as 1 or 2 characters, you get to pick a team of 3. You now have the choice between Cotton and Apley in 3 colour varieties, plus Silk and Needle to pick from. Each character has their strengths and weaknesses. This is Magical Night Dreams turned up to 11. The gameplay is faster and more intense, and there is less emphasis on magic attacks. While magic is available, it has to be charged, and this leaves you open. Instead, the game encourages the use of the new change system, which acts as your bomb attack while switching your active character. Each of the stages has had a graphical enhancement or 2, and the menus are now rendered in the Saturn's high-res mode and look pretty damn crisp. This is generally a much better looking, though far more difficult version of Cotton 2. Sadly, Cotton 2 and Boomerang demand huge prices on the second-hand market, and it could be ages before we see either of these two get a re-release on modern platforms. A shame really. Meanwhile, I suppose you could attempt to emulate it, but performance varies drastically.
And there's also Rainbow Cotton on the Dreamcast. It looks amazing, but unfortunately it's kind of dull.
I dedicated about 30 seconds to this game in the original episode, but now I've beaten it, I have a lot more to say. Let's dive in. So Rainbow Cotton can be considered the spiritual successor to Panorama Cotton. Both are on-rail shooters from behind, similar to Space Harrier or Afterburner, where enemies come towards you. Also, like Panorama Cotton, this game has a more cartoony and colourful style than the mainline series. Also, like Panorama Cotton, the game has a deceptively high difficulty level that suddenly jumps up and then exponentially rises from there. I played the game on a popular commercial Dreamcast emulator, at a 1080p upscale and with a widescreen hack. While having the extra screen real estate is nice, it doesn't offer any gameplay benefits, and the logic is still tied to a 4:3 screen resolution. I chose to play Rainbow Cotton this way because it's a gorgeous game and I wanted it to fill every edge of my monitor. Gorgeous really is an understatement, from the bright colours to the highly detailed textures. Cotton's billowing hair, dress, and broom fibres. Whether the levels are big and open, small or confined, they're brimming with detail. And the good looks aren't just restricted to the gameplay. Level transitions are served with full motion video animation, with full voice acting in Japanese. No more da-da-da-da-da-da-da slow text crawl bullshit. Absolutely glorious. What isn't glorious is the game's floaty-ass controls. We're a witch on a broomstick, I get that. But Cotton bounds around like a jelly baby in a bouncy castle, getting sprung every which way in tight spaces. Though to be fair, I'd get sprung in Cotton's tight spaces as well. Aiming feels less than intuitive, with a double reticle that still only provides you with the vaguest hint of where your projectiles will go. They always feel so underpowered when they do hit, whether you're attack level 4 or attack level 1. With magic harder to come by thanks to having to shoot it out of the floating heads, a great deal of the time I just feel so damn powerless, heading into a boss battle without a single spell. That wouldn't be a problem if the game were easy. I could stumble around the controls and be done with the whole thing in time for breakfast. Unfortunately, this game's difficulty level is phenomenal. I know I'm keeping all on, but take a look at this boss. Constantly planting flowers that shoot fireballs, flutters around like a demented meth addict, throws grenades at you, and can launch homing missiles that have huge AoE. The difficulty only skyrocketed from here, I can't see how a human could be capable of beating this boss, or this boss, or this boss. I took zero shame in cracking open a memory editor and freezing my health. If the game is going to be unfair, then so shall I. Rainbow Cotton consists of only 5 levels. This could well be why the developers really ramped up the difficulty, to compensate for the short length. Suppose I better take notes. The game already has fantastic replay value in its score system and branching paths. There was really no need to pad things out with the obnoxious challenge. I'd still recommend Rainbow Cotton, though once again this is quite an expensive game secondhand. An easy $100 to $200. As interesting and as beautiful as this game is, I'd much rather have those $100 to buy groceries for a week instead. For less than that, you can fit your Dreamcast with a GDEMU and play it off an SD card, which I thoroughly recommend, by the way. Lastly, I'd like to take a look at Trouble Witch's Origin, Episode 1, Daughters of Amalgam. Released for Steam in 2016, this is an excellent 2D shmup from developers Studio Sieste and publisher Rocket Engine. A fantastic game in its own right, and perhaps one that I might choose to cover on Sushi Bites at another time. But right now, I'd like to share its relevance to this episode. In 2017, this game received a DLC, where you can play as Cotton. Complete with voiced story cutscenes and BGM replacement. When you beat a stage, you get the iconic tea time moments too. For a while, this felt like the only Cotton game we were going to get. A short but vastly enjoyable DLC for a completely unrelated shmup. Perhaps it's time to wake up from the fantastic night dream. No, you can keep dreaming, my friends. In 2019, it was announced that a remaster of Fantastic Night Dream's Cotton would be coming to PlayStation 4, PC Steam, and Nintendo Switch. This remake was announced in May of last year, but at the time of recording, it's been over a year and we've heard nothing. It's entirely possible that this game may have been postponed, or possibly even cancelled, and that would be especially crushing. If I find out the Wu Flu has cancelled the Cotton remake, I'm getting buff swole and flying over to China myself to personally beat up the damn virus with my bare hands. I can only hope the remake is still coming, but at this point, who knows? Thanks for allowing me the indulgence of looking back, and may we also look forward to better times, however long it may take for them to come. Thank you for supporting Sushi Bites, and expect a lot more where that came from. This has been Sushi Bites. Thanks for watching.